Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. The year was 1889. A quiet and content country was shocked to read in the New York Times that there was war. Insurrection was throughout the land. It was war. The people and the cities were taking matters into their own hands. It was war. The war on telephone poles. In 1876, a young Alexander Graham Bell showed off his new invention, the telephone. The New York World promptly asked, "Of what use is such an invention?" At first, it was merely a curiosity. For 10 cents, you could see Bell demonstrate it himself. Then a Boston banker paid for a private line between his office and his house so he could tell his family exactly when he'd be home for dinner. Samuel Clemens was one of the first Americans to own a phone, but he wasn't all that taken by them. He said, "The human voice carries entirely too far as it is." Yet by 1892, when Bell himself was demonstrating long-distance calls from New York to Chicago, cities and towns across the nation were wired. And we do mean wired. Every telephone and every party line needed a separate wire between itself and the central exchange. It was not unusual for electric and telephone wires to snap as the weather changed. They would fall to the street. Americans had grave concerns about sharing their privacy with a public utility. Americans also had a fierce regard for purity and for aesthetics. Along with skyscrapers, these poles and wires were marring the landscape, and the sense of distance, as it had always been known, was collapsing. In Boise, in front of the Eastman Building, we can see that there were 4 cross arms of wires going up 9th Street and another 12 carrying wires down Main Street. Main Street had wires strung on both sides of it, obscuring the view. So it came that by the 1890s, we had a war on telephone poles. In 1889, the businesses and homeowners of Red Bank, New Jersey, threatened to tar and feather anyone putting up telephone poles. A man cut a pole down, and a judge found that he was not guilty because the pole had been obnoxious. The city council in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, ordered policemen to cut down all telephone poles in town. The mayor of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, ordered the police chief and fire department to chop down the telephone poles. By the time they had chopped down one telephone pole, the linemen had clung to the top of each and every pole so that people could not chop down anymore. This became standard practice with the telephone company until they had wires strung between the poles, in which case it was no longer practical or legal to cut them down. Even so, one constable took down 2 poles that were holding 40 to 50 wires. The war was over before it began. In 1876, on May 10th, Bell told Watson to come here, I need you. That first call between 2 rooms led to a demonstration of the technology later in 1876. Only 4 years after that first demonstration, every town in the United States with a population over 10,000 was wired for telephones. Most of these, of course, were not wired between the towns, only within the towns. By the year 1900, only 24 years after its first invention, in the vast United States of America, there were more telephones than bathtubs. and the war on telephone poles was already forgotten. Let's get into old MacDonald's overalls and play E-I-E-I-O. It's East Idaho, East Idaho. Wow! It's not a very long drive, folks, and there are some mighty interesting things to check out over on the great eastern side of Idaho. During the end of September and 1st of October, my good friend Harold Moss and I had occasion to go exploring around eastern Idaho. In past EIEIOs, we went and checked out the Teton Flood Museum in Rexburg, Idaho. We drove Highway 33 over to 32 and looked at the beautiful west side of the Teton Range. It took us 2 shows to make it along the Mesa Falls Scenic Byway, Highway 47, looking at beautiful lower and upper Mesa Falls. And on our last adventure, we took a little jaunt out Highway 84 and took a look at Big Springs, an amazing springs putting out 120,000 gallons of water a day and forming the Henry's Fork of the Snake River. Harold and I went on up to West Yellowstone and enjoyed a day driving around amazing Yellowstone Park. We'll probably go do that another time. However, this is EIEIO. We're celebrating East Idaho, so we're going to wake up in the morning to a beautiful sunrise in West Yellowstone, and we're going to drive back down Highway 20 looking at gorgeous Idaho, gorgeous eastern Idaho, as we head to Pocatello. West Yellowstone is a fun little touristy town based on a Western theme, of course. The first trainload of tourists going to Yellowstone National Park arrived here in 1908, and that was when the town began. Today, the town covers 49 blocks. It was incorporated in 1966. Took a while to come around to being a recognized town. Even that was early compared to getting the streets paved and the sidewalks put in. That happened in the late 1980s. The population of 1,177 enjoys 160 inches of snow for an average. That's 13.5 feet of snow that is too dry to make snowballs out of. The Chamber of Commerce says that it's a cross-country skier's paradise and a 6-year-old's disappointment. The town has gone nuts for buffalo. Hanging on every lamppost is the buffalo's image. And throughout the town, there are these fiberglass buffalo that are decorated in the most wild and wonderful ways. From Yellowstone, we head to the west on Highway 20. Ahead of us is the Continental Divide, which we will cross into Idaho at Targhee Pass. is 7,072 feet. This was October 2nd, 2008. So we were treated to the paintbrush of autumn. As we come down out of the mountains that make up the Continental Divide, we enter a broad prairie. It is in this prairie that the first Roman Catholic services were held in the state of Idaho, July 10th, 1840. After crossing some broad rolling hills, we enter the Island Park area of the Henry's Fork of the Snake River. It is in the Island Park area that we come across Harriman State Park. Started in 1902 as a large cattle ranch called Railroad Ranch, it became a summer retreat for wealthy Easterners and eventually Idaho's largest state park. Averill and Roland Harriman donated this park to the state of Idaho in 1977. The contribution prompted our development of a professionally managed state's park system. Through the Harriman State Park, you reach the Harriman Wildlife Refuge, 16,000 acres set aside for wildlife. The meandering Henry's Fork of the Snake River, lodgepole pine forests, and great meadows make for a truly abundant wildlife refuge.
Yeah, it looks to the right, isn't it? Well, of course, that's just the stuff along the highway. It looks like a city over there.
What looked like a city that you may have heard Harold refer to is the town of Island Park. Here, through a long-distance haze, you can see the Grand Tetons off in the distance. One feature of this area is so huge that you have to know where to look for it, or you'll miss it. 2 million years ago, the caldera that is now under Yellowstone was under this area. This caldera was 60 miles wide. 1,300,000 years ago, another smaller caldera was settled in to the north. On Bishop Mountain, which is 7,810 feet high, they have left a steel tower, which is another 72 feet tall, that used to look for fires, and you can now go up into the tower and look over these calderas. Harold and I did not do that. We went driving on down the river. Here we begin our descent into the broad Snake River Plain. As we drive down into the upper reaches of the Snake River Plain, right around Ashton, we come across one of Highway 20's best views of the Teton Mountains. Unfortunately, it was rather hazy the day we were there, but you can still get a sense of how stunning these mountains are from the west side. It was from this west side that French fur trappers first saw these stunning peaks. Being French and or trappers, they named them what they immediately thought of, the Trois Tetons, the three breasts. Mountain men who spoke English later called them pilot knobs, but somehow that did not stick, as well as the Trois Tetons. the Snake River Plain, we come into agricultural land par excellence. A lot of potatoes and barley from this area, folks. The prosperity and commerce of this area is reflected in the Highway 20 becoming a 4-lane divided highway about 8 miles south of Ashton. About halfway between Rexburg and Idaho Falls is the town of Rigby. Rigby is a bustling town. Well, I don't see a whole lot of bustle, but it is quite a pleasant little farming community. Rigby is also much more. Rigby is where television was invented. A high school student named Philo T. Farnsworth one day drew on his science teacher's chalkboard a diagram that would become the cathode ray tube television. The story of Philo Farnsworth is a fascinating history, and we'll probably take it up at some point. However, today I just want to let you know there is a museum here called the Farnsworth TV and Pioneer Museum in Rigby. It not only celebrates the development of television, it celebrates the pioneers that settled this area and writers of this area, including Vardis Fisher. The museum is open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 1 o'clock to 5 p.m. The admission: adults $2, students $1, and under 6 is free. Unfortunately, the museum was closed when Harold and I were there, so we just bought some food at the mini mark that is just south of the museum, got back on Highway 20, and headed over to Freeway 15, which took us from Idaho Falls down to Pocatello. Between Idaho Falls and Burley, the freeway cuts through a no-man's land of lava flows. Very interesting, and sure makes me glad I'm driving a car instead of walking it. From Burley to Pocatello, we once again find ourselves in stunning Snake River Plain farm country, surrounded by the framework of mountains. A just slightly overweight lady joined the exercise club. They all got to talking and were asking her, "Well, you look great. Did you join just to keep yourself fit?" "Well, actually," the lady confided, "I joined because my husband prefers to make love to slender women." Well, all the girls got a laugh out of that, and they agreed, whatever it takes, it's a good thing to keep you exercising. "You don't understand," the newcomer explained. "That's what he's doing while I'm here doing these darned exercises." And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for watching. See you next week. And in the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo.